Today we're going to unpack a deep and honestly a pretty challenging idea: how someone can find real joy in the middle of incredible suffering. We're jumping into a story of resilience, and it's called Persecuted But Not Forsaken.
So let's start with this. Just let these words sink in for a second. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. I mean, that's a powerful command. It's bold, it's confident, almost defiant, especially when you find out where it was written.
And yeah, here's the kicker. The guy who wrote those words, the Apostle Paul, he wasn't sitting in a comfortable office. He was locked up in a Roman prison. So that's the big question, right? How does a man in chains write with so much passion about joy? That's exactly what we're going to get into.
All right, so this brings us right to the heart of the matter, to this profound mystery we're calling the paradox of Paul's chains.
You know, to even get a handle on Paul's joy, we first have to understand the sheer scale of his pain. This wasn't some kind of abstract philosophical faith he had. No, his faith was forged day in and day out in the fire of just relentless hardship.
And I mean, just look at this list. This comes from his own writings. It's almost hard to read. Tribulation, distress, persecution, famine, nakedness, peril. He was beaten, stoned, shipwrecked. He faced dangers from robbers, from rivers out in the wilderness. He dealt with sleeplessness and hunger. And on top of all that physical suffering, he carried this constant heavy weight of caring for all the churches. And of course, being thrown in prison multiple times. It's just a staggering amount of pain for one person to endure.
So on one hand, you have that unbelievable list of suffering, stuff that would absolutely break most people. But on the other hand, you get this unwavering, almost unbelievable declaration. In all these things, we are more than conquerors. The contrast is just wow. So how did he get from one to the other?
Paul actually tells us his mindset. He writes, "We are hard-pressed on every side but not crushed, perplexed but not in despair, persecuted but not abandoned." Do you see what he's doing there? He's not denying the reality of the pressure. He's not pretending it doesn't hurt. He's just denying its ultimate power to destroy him. And that points us straight to the source of his strength.
So where did that kind of resilience come from? Well, to answer that, we have to get to the real heart of it all. We have to talk about the love that sustains.
Paul basically throws down this challenge, this powerful rhetorical question: who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Now, he's not actually looking for suggestions here. He's making a really bold statement.
Because for Paul, the case was already closed. The ultimate proof was in. His logic was simple but unshakable. If God did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, then what could possibly happen to him? What trial, what suffering that could ever be powerful enough to cancel out that love? For Paul, the cross was the final word on the matter.
And this brings us to this incredible idea, this concept of suffering love. It's a love that's so profound, it actually willingly embraces suffering for someone else. Let me share a quick human story that gives us a tiny window into what this looks like.
There's a story from a medical missionary named Wilfred Grenfell. He tells of a woman who was brought into his hospital. She had been fatally burned because her drunken husband had thrown a lit lamp at her.
The police were there trying to get a statement from her before she died. But with her last breath, she looked over at her husband, who had done this to her, and she protected him. She just said, "Sir, it was just an accident," and then she was gone. Now, that tragic human story gives us just a tiny glimpse of the kind of divine love that was fueling Paul. And this is so important. Paul's endurance didn't come from some grim sense of duty, like he was just gritting his teeth to get through it. No, it was fueled by a deep, personal connection to the love of Christ. And what's really amazing is that this love didn't just give Paul the strength to survive his suffering, it completely transformed it. It turned his prison cell into an opportunity. So let's talk about how his mission was actually reshaped by his chains. You'd think that being thrown in prison would be game over for a missionary, right? But for Paul, it didn't pause his mission at all. It just reshaped it. In this incredible twist, his persecution actually became a new and surprisingly effective platform for the gospel. And he was incredibly strategic, even while locked up. First, he always focused on major influential cities like Philippi and Ephesus, knowing the message would spread from there. Second, he poured himself into training others, mentoring leaders like Timothy and Titus who could carry the work on. Third, he always followed this simple model: start with the people right around you. And fourth, he stayed connected by writing letters, instructing, encouraging, and leading the churches from afar. This wasn't just survival. This was turning a prison cell into a mission headquarters.
So when you bring all of this together, the suffering, the unshakable love, the reshaped mission, it all leads us to our final, powerful conclusion, the very heart of this story. Persecuted but never forsaken.
So why was he so confident, even in chains? Because he wasn't focused on his temporary circumstances. He was absolutely convinced that sharing in Christ's sufferings right now was directly connected to sharing in his glory later. He was playing the long game, with his eyes fixed on the eternal outcome.
And just listen to how he sums up his own life near the end. This is not the language of a victim. This is the mindset of a victor. He says he fought the good fight. His faith was active and engaged. He finished the race. He did what he was called to do. He kept the faith. He stayed loyal to the very end. And because of all that, he confidently awaits the crown, his eternal reward. This image of his final moments is just so powerful. Standing there at the place of his execution, he wasn't looking down at the executioner's sword. Instead, it says, he looked up through the calm blue heaven of that summer's day to the throne of the eternal. His hope was completely locked in, right to the very last second.
And this, right here, is the ultimate truth that we can take from Paul's life. This is what allowed him to rejoice in a prison cell. Believers may be persecuted, but they are never, ever forsaken.
So that leaves us with a question for ourselves. Inspired by Paul's story, how can we start to reframe our own struggles and trials? How can we begin to see them not just as obstacles we have to get through, but maybe, just maybe, as opportunities? Opportunities for a deeper faith and a reshaped purpose.